everyone, welcome and welcome back to my channel. You might remember this painting from my last videos where we did the underpainting together. From the feedback I got, it would appear that you guys like this format, so let's continue on this painting today, exactly as last time, in real-time pace. I've told you in my last video that this was my initial idea, to take one painting of a smaller format and then do it from beginning to the end together with you guys in real-time pace. So obviously this is going to be a part of a series of videos dedicated to this painting and to the different stages that we are inevitably going through to finish a painting. I kind of went back and forth on how to make sense of splitting them up in different parts, and as I told you in the last video, I thought that it would be best to split it up in thematical pieces, like maybe painting realistic grass and painting the sky and painting pebbles and things like that. And I know that this might be the better solution from a SEO point of view, and this would probably perform better in the YouTube search and stuff like that, but this is simply not the way that I work. I do not go through paintings area by area, I go through paintings layer by layer, so I'm touching nearly everything in every area in the painting, on the first layer, on the second, third, etc. until I get where I need to go. I think what I like to cover in this video will be the first and second layer of color that we're laying down upon the underpainting, and this will be roughly maybe the major part of the painting before we get into the later stages, which will probably be another video, and get to go into details further, and this will be maybe the most important part where we get to tie everything together and give some extra attention to those little details that will make the difference at the end between a good and a great painting and making it look really realistic. And when I say the most important part is maybe the most impactful part from the visual point of view, because I think what we're going to do today with laying down the groundwork will be much more important from a standpoint of how successful this painting is going to get in the end. If you get this stage wrong, the stage that we're going to do today, no amount of details will help you out in the next phase. So today's going to be crucial to get this painting to a nice level of credibility and of truthfulness, helping it make it look believable. And now, without further ado, let's get cracking. There are different ways of how you can go about the next stage. As I've already told you in the intro, I'm not working in thematical areas generally speaking, but I like to move on from the background into the foreground gradually. I don't concentrate on details at this stage, but simply on laying down the right color. So I suggest we start with the background that is furthest away from us and then gradually move forward. At this stage I am still using a flat rectangular brush because we need to cover larger areas of the canvas, and this is really what works best for me. The medium that I'm using for reference is the Turner medium. I find it's really malleable, so this is the one that I like working with. Now, we will start with this mountain in the background. As you can see, we have this part here that seems to be a muted green. So we are going into a green and maybe add a little bit of grey to it. Let's test out what I have on it. Now this is clearly too light. Maybe chromium green deep. Let's try this on for size. Let's see. Yes, better. Oh, not bad at all actually. Okay, so we are going to tap that down here. Does not cover the whole of the mountain, so there's a little stripe that is rather greyish, fairly light. Then it descends into the valley here, and we have another another part of it going down here. Now, as we are at the same distance between this mountain and this one, I frequently check whether we can reuse this color whilst I have it on the brush. If we have another foresty patch here on the right mountain, that we can use it. And well, a little bit, maybe not an awful lot here on top of the mountain, but it's rather less green, so I think I will lay it down because this might be the same type of forest that we have in both mountains. But this one is much more in the mist and in the rain, so it appears much more muted and not as green. So we'll lay this down and then go over with something else in order to have it grayed down quite a bit. We have one smidgen of green here as well, and this is about it actually, because all the other greens that we have in the rest of the painting have a warmer undertone and are not exactly the right hue for this, but we can, I have forgotten this, we have another patch of the forest descending here as well, and I believe that this is it for the greens. Now we will turn to the brighter areas of the background, so maybe this patch here for instance, and here. Maybe yellow ochre mixed in with warm grey. Okay, let's see. This is not bad. This lacks a grey undertone maybe, but once it will sit down and dry down a little bit, this will be better, I believe. So this is not bad. Then we have one smidgen here, a little bit here. It's not a worry if it is too bright, because we will, I mean, this is such a small part of this light color that we have here, that when we will go over with the brown, it will be all right. And then we have a little bit here as well. Same thing as for the green. Do we have it here? Yes, we do have a fair bit of it on the mountain on the right. Take the bit here. Oh, this is a bit too orange. Never mind, this will dull down when it's dry. And then a little bit here and there. Maybe a little here as well. Once again, we will go over with the green-brown color over it, so it won't be as bright anymore. A little bit here. Well, we will keep this base color, then add a bit more of yellow ochre into it to warm it up. Yes, exactly. This should be about the same color scheme, so we have it here, here in the distance, on the path, a little bit here, a little bit here, although I think it would be fairer to go in with more brown, but we will see in the process. Do we have it here? Not at all. Let's continue, it's a little bit around here. More so. On this side here. A little bit more here. Here. Then we have it in the highlights here, but I prefer to work from dark to light, so I will put down another color first before going into highlights that are the same color. There are more of them in the foreground here as well. Maybe, yes, we leave the rest alone for the time being. There is a color of transition here somewhere that is between a green, a brown and a gray. So this will be quite a challenge to get this one right. When in doubt, go for the most muted color that are already pre-mixed, that I have in a tube, to give me a start. Instance, in this type of situation, I would try Green Umber, which is a very underrated color, I believe, and it works magic. if you are working in these types of very muted landscapes. It is fairly between grey, brown and green, and you could pull it in whichever direction you need it to go, depending on what you mix in with it. It might be too light, but we'll see. Yes, it is a little bit too green and too light. So we mix a little bit of black into it and see what then happens. Yes, there you go. You see how it creates a perfect transitional color for the background that we need. And we can mix it in here. Go over the brighter parts that we went over and maybe I went overboard with. This just helps us blend it in really nicely. I just pick up a smaller brush, maybe in order to pick up a bit of our brighter tone there, and go over it a little bit and give it a little bit of definition, like so, like so. And we are stretching the color a little bit over the green umber so that we have something in between that is not that bright. It still has the same undertone. And we need to stretch it over here as well. And something like that seems not bad at all for a first layer of color, remember. So don't be too ambitious at this stage. You just have to get feeling for the different colors. If they are not exactly right, this is not at all a problem. Now let's move down to the row of trees in the background. I feel like the trees that appear nearly black have somewhat of a greenish hue. So I will take the same green that we've already had in the mountains, mix it with a fair amount of black. The reason why I prefer starting with the darkest trees is because this way I can soften the edge more easily going in with the lighter color. I feel like this looks more natural than if I were to muddle in the black into the lighter colors. So what are we? Yes, here, there. I'm taking my round brush that gives me a little bit more of a precision than if I were to go in with a flat brush like previously. These are also smaller areas that I'm covering, so this gives me more control over my brush strokes. Yes. Okay. Okay, and then I'm trying to make brush strokes that resemble the form of a pine tree. It's not very precise, mind, but I feel like this type of detail will show in the finished painting because you will have a feel for the texture a bit more than were you to do it like in a geometrical way. We might darken some areas of the woodland here as well, just with little touches here and there, nothing too precise because some trees are moving in and out of the mist and we more or less make out their form. So yes, I believe I will have to stop here because the further we move up here, the more the mountain is immersed in the rain and the mist, so we would definitely not see the different details here. And then we have just a little bit of darkness here and maybe here. And then again, what we said last week is that there are also some of the summits peeking in the background, so we don't only have those dark pines in the foreground, but also we see them a little bit in the background as well. So let's make sure that we get those a rigid edge. And then we're going into a brown color. It might be something of burnt sienna, maybe a little bit, and a little bit of ochre, with a little bit of black in it because it is grayish. It is a muddled color. It's not bright and shouty one. This is maybe still too light. Let's pick up more of black. A little bit of burnt umber. Yes, let's stick with this. So once again we're trying to keep ridged edge, going into the black. Then we try to make out the form of a tree here, here. Let's see, here, here, and here. And wash out the edge, right, of the black. Go into it a little bit. And we still need to have something of an in-between color, so with a little more black, but that is not solid black. I need to have a better transition as well. Once again, we're going into those blacks. Trying to not have such a distinct line between them all, right? Then we go here to a transitional space. And do we have a little bit? Yes, we still have a little bit of this color going on here. We are mostly done with this layer for this part of the mountain. Now we might want to go a little bit further into here. Brown ochre, I believe this will make up the most of the chunk of the right mountain. We grab a square brush once again because now we will cover larger chunks of the mountain, so this is a more practical choice. What I would suggest you to do is, once again, give you some guidance and cover maybe bigger parts of it so that you give yourself a feeling for the overall tone in this mountain. It's not a problem if this is not exactly the color, it does not go everywhere, I get that. This is not about it, this is about setting a general tone. So we have this undertone here. And do we need to go in here? Yes, I believe we do. Right, okay. Now we go to the more darker color that we had before, so green umber, which once again is really very practical in quite a few situations. And then we paint in the areas that are in the shadow. Mark out the areas that are most in shadow here within the greens. Right, so we have this here, this here. I believe my dog will be barking any second now because our neighbor came home, and whenever there's someone using the staircase, he's going just completely nuts. He's a shepherd's dog, but I don't believe he knows that. I do think he considers himself to be a guard dog. What did I tell you? What did I tell you? It's ridiculous. Okay, and as I've told you, do I need to go over here? Maybe a little bit in here as well. Okay, and now I believe that some of the areas in here that are darker don't have a greenish undertone, but rather a purplish one. So this is what we're going to do in order to create a little bit more of an interest and complexity in here. If it mixes in with the dark green, it will be very interesting, I believe. So we have it a little bit on here. So we have it here. I need a smaller brush. Okay, this is maybe a little harsh, but it will work. And once again, we are not bothering ourselves with the details yet. We just want to have the base color in a good place, so that when we do details, we have a good base. We have a little bit of purple here as well. Okay, here and here. Here, a little bit here as well. This purple undertone, it does not show a lot, but you'll see once it is dried down, it will give us the necessary depth and contrast within all those different colors. We'll show more, but maybe we will add a little more as well when we go from here. I would leave this part of the mountain alone now. Question is, do we touch this one yet? Or do we wait for the sky? Let's do the sky, because we will probably do it at the same time. What do we do with the sky? I would take blue-gray, as I always do. I don't even know why I'm asking myself the question, because I know what I end up using, and this will be cool gray. I need a fair amount of white, because the sky is very, very, very bright. And then just the slightest bit of cool gray, because we only need to have this undertone. And I would also change brushes. I would take this one, a very fluffy and dense round brush that will allow us to have something very smooth. Okay, let's test this out. Not bad. Not bad. So I was about to put down the color for the sky. I'm reasonably pleased with the hue. I do think we're not far off from what it is supposed to be. We have a nice bluish undertone, maybe a bit too much, so we will see, but we can always paint over. And as the underpainting was quite dark, at any rate we will have to have several goes at the sky in order to cover everything up nicely. So it's not at all a problem if we're not there yet, right from the beginning. We'll get there gradually. Off the medium, and I'm starting to lift off too much of the color underneath, so I'm going to ease out a bit. And this here, at this point I will try to bring over the white just a little bit over the top of the mountain, so that we don't have to worry what color it is and how we'll mix it, because it will just be glazed. But we do need to have not that rugged of a border on top of it. Okay, there you go. You see, we didn't even have to color it at all, just the glazing did the trick. The same more or less will apply here, although I think that we will need to do a little more work here in this part where we have some mountains that are furthest away, because we still see some detail in there. So what I'm going to do is I will glaze over with the white or the very light grey, and then I will bring in some details a bit later on and then glaze over again. So that way we will have something that is really not sharp at all, really out of focus, really something that we are imagining more than we are seeing it. Need to cover up those brush strokes that we did previously. Right, and now here, what can we have? We need to bring in the mist a little more into the mountains. So once again, we are glazing over and have a more opaque layer on top here and more transparent there. I will pick up a little bit of color and try to smooth everything out a little bit so that we don't have apparent brush strokes. This is a layer with nearly only the oil paints and no extender at all because we already have it on the canvas, so it's already smooth enough and the underlying layer is enough in order to have a nice and smooth layer. I like using this brush for the sky because I do feel that it helps me buffer everything in, so we don't have those very geometrical brush strokes that a rectangular brush would leave, but we have something a bit more chaotic, a little bit more difficult to make out where it starts, where it ends. So this is really a very good brush for this type of work. I'm unsure whether we can push it much further. I'm afraid I will be lifting off the layers underneath if I go in with more. So I would rather let it sit down a little bit at this stage. And you see this, I have applied too much pressure, so I will just cover it up a little bit and we'll go back to the sky, but for now this is what we have for the upper part of the painting. So I told you that I wanted to bring in a little bit of detail in there, so let's go back to the square brush and we'll mix grey, white and just a tad of green. It should really not be very distinct. A bit more than this though. Will this work? Yes, not bad. So we'll bring a little bit of color back into here. Maybe it should have been a bit more grey than green. We'll see. I leave it with this for now. I will apply small diagonal strokes in order to suggest the slopes that we are seeing. It's not bad actually. I think this might work. Okay, and now maybe what we can do is go back with the other brush and mark the transition in a more defined way. So go into the white and maybe, I don't know, put it down here, because for now what I'm not liking is that I used too much medium, as I've told you already. So it mixed in a bit too much with the underlying colors. So this should be much lighter, this part of the sky, and be much more in contrast with the mountain far away than it was before I touched it up. And this is true here. At some point we need to rework this, the transition between the right mountain and the background as well, because it is a more distinct border and it is a more precise line between the two. So I'm not going to do it now because it would be wet on wet and it would not be a defined line. So I have to let the white sit, or the colors sit a little bit, and then go over it once it's dry, or drier at any rate. My question was, there are some parts in the sky, some clouds, that are darker than the rest of it. So my question was, should I go in with a darker color now while it's wet, because it's easier in the sky to smudge it out and have nice lines, or not? And I think that because we need to get the sky much lighter in the end than it is now, we will rather leave those parts that are dark, and we rather will have the dark parts being made of this layer here, and go and mark them when we go over with the white once again at a later point. So let's leave it alone here for the moment and move into the middle grounds. What color should we start with? This is my question. I'm not doing it in a particular order, I'm just going maybe for the parts that are the most colorful, because there will be some points that will help me find my way through the paintings. So for instance, there we have a fairly orange part, which is not orange enough. You have a little bit of it there. Yeah, much better. You have it here. And you have it there. Not enough. Once again, I'm not worrying about details here, right? I just want the right undercolor to be here and go from here. We do have a little bit of orange in here. Just a little bit. And also a little bit in here. Then we go back to a calmer color, which will be Mars yellow, and cover the largest part, going from the background into the foreground. Also, we have it here as well. We have it a little bit here and here. This is it, I'd say. Let's see. This is not bad. Once again, I'm going nearly over the whole area because the paint is pretty transparent at this point. I will not cover it up entirely, but this will give me a little bit of a backdrop to work on. Okay. Do we have the same color somewhere in here? Yes. I think this is what we need to soften a little bit more. Right, maybe here a little bit. Now let's mark the stones. Here we go. Now we have the stones. Actually, I picked up the lighter grey. I will need to apply the darker grey afterwards. This was not intentional, I just thought that the grey might be darker than it ended up being, actually. But never mind, we'll all write this. Now we have to go in with a darker grey. So this would be here. And there, and we might bring the lighter one back a little bit here, because this is a transitional area. Wow, it's kind of in between. Now it's looking lighter than what it was supposed to. Oh yes, something like that. I believe this is better. Then we need to go in with a darker grey into this tone. This will help us define it a little more as well. Here as well. And in like so. Maybe a little bit here as well, as it goes off into the distance. Definitely here. Also here and here. A little more over here. And also a bit here as well. We might darken this bit a little bit as well, and a little here. Now let's go back into the highlights of the stone. I don't want to make it a bright white right from the beginning. I'm starting with the darker part of this, well, bright part, so that I have somewhere to go from there. And I might still brighten it up a little bit, if need be, in order to make them really stand out. Here and here. Here we're just stretching the color slightly. We're not laying it down in a opaque way, because there is no real patch that is white or grey. We just need to brighten it up. So my brush is not that much loaded with color, or much less than it was in here, so that I just stretch it out a little bit. While we are on the lighter color palette, we might get into the river a little bit. So I'm picking exactly the same color that I use for the highlights and the stones in order to go into the river. As you can see, this is a warm grey. So once again, we are starting out with the relatively darkest color within this light space, in order to have somewhere to go from there and have the possibility to brighten it up further along the road. So here my brush is not loaded with color again, because the river seems to be fading into the distance, so I don't need an awful lot of it. Just to mark it as being a relative highlight will be enough, I believe, for the time being. Maybe this moves up a little further in here. I'm unsure, and we can stretch it out until here. Good. Now, what else can we do? I feel like we need to bring in a lot of grays in the foreground so that we have a better base to work on in future when we are going into the details of the stones, of the pebbles. So once again, I believe that if we take a warm gray, this will be sufficiently gray, maybe too bright. In order to stand out, it'd be enough of a cooler tone next to all those warm colors, but we do need to darken this gray. So I'm taking green umber into it. It should be, yes, it is a better color. And we will go over all of this in small patches like this, not covering it up very thickly, but just laying down enough of it. I'm letting the brown shine through more in this middle part, and the closer we get to the foreground, the more we actually have the brown patches looking through, so we have to stop somewhere down the road. I feel like here would be a nice place to stop our grays. Just softening the edge a little bit here. How does it look like on the other side? Just blocking in the stone while I'm at it. And we have the exact same thing on the other side. So we are going in with the warm grey mixed in with burnt umber in a really, really thin layer to let the brown shine through. It's all right. I'll even this just out a little bit. So all of this is the road where the stones are in the pavement. Is this more of an opaque grey here? And I believe that here we can go a little brighter, maybe a little like this. What are we attacking next? I believe that we need to re-establish some of the shadows here. So back into our blacks. Something like that. Now we need to have some reddish browns in here. So I'm mixing them with the black and bringing in the hue ever so slightly in on top of here and here. Here down by the river, or in front of it rather. A little bit in the background as well as here the shadows are maybe more reddish than they are black, as well as here. We can also use it in a very thin layer in order to warm up this part, which works fairly well. And then descend onto the road a little bit with this. In here. Let's connect this correctly. And there's the brown patch in there, far off the road. And I feel like, especially here in the foreground, we have a lot of those really reddish hues. So let's bring them into the foreground. I don't want to cover up a lot of the black, and we are not yet going into the details of the pebbles, so we might add it a little bit here though. Here as well. And I wouldn't go any further than that, honestly. We have a little bit of grey here, by the way, so maybe let's bring this back in a little bit. Maybe not as bright, no, but get the general idea. Just fairly more on the grey side. Maybe we can push it a little bit over here as well. Okay, now we need to pay attention to the right part of the painting, and we do need to do two things. First and foremost, bring in the reddish hues, and they are around here, a little bit here as well actually, and the background. Then we need to then go into some details here. Here. We can start to work on some of the details at least. They're not going to be definitive here, but let's start putting them down. This is why the browns mix in with those ochre tones. We have something of a stripe here and here. Something washed out, and stretching out the colour in here to do better transition, because this is not a very straight line that we initially had. And then again, darken this wall with a little more black. Now what I feel we should still achieve in this session would be laying down the base colors for Georgina's garment, starting with the skirt, and I'm going in the blacks once again in order to accentuate the shadows and to have a layer that we can easily blend out. So this would be this part here primarily. Then I would go into our green umber and start building this very dark green color. I think I might just do the whole skirt in this color and then let it become lighter. As you can see, the highlights that we laid in the underpainting are still shining through, and this will be even more apparent once it has set down a little bit and dried. Now we need to mix the green of the skirt. I'm wondering whether this is the right one. Let's try it. With golden green, I believe that's not bad actually. We will just have to lighten it up progressively. But this is probably what we should be using as the base color. Right, I'm not worrying about the draping yet. As I've told you, we will look into this when we get into the details. For now, today is not the day. While we're at it, can we use this color to get some greens into the tartan? I believe we can. For instance, in the darkest parts, this might be the color we'll end up using. And here the underpainting will really help us get where we need to go, because the highlights underneath will change how the golden green will appear. Naturally, without us having to worry about how we're going to mix it. So the fact that we're just glazing it is making things so much easier for us. We don't have to worry about an awful lot of things, actually. So I believe we can actually really glaze over the whole thing, because we can always go over with the white, but this will set a overall tone which will come in handy when we are going into detail of those intersections within the tartan. So I'm really tempted to just do this, you know, really a classical glaze all over. I might leave the brightest highlights out of the glaze, but I think this will be inevitable in a way, because I'm not into the finest details yet, and I've grabbed the rectangular brush, so this will make it impossible for me to be extremely precise about it, but that's not, I don't believe this is a problem at this stage. Now, what we are going to do is mixing in some Indian yellow in it and get into the brightest highlights that way. Let's see whether this is enough for brightening up. Yes, kind of. So I dabbed my brush into Indian yellow, and because this would not have been enough, also into pale ochre, and this did it for me, I believe. We have a highlight in here, going into these bigger draping, and here and here, going very lightly over the rest as well. And we are not going into any details of draping now. So this will have to do for now. But I believe that we can reuse this color for some parts of the tartan. Let's see. Might be, yes. Might be sufficient for this part. Really the brightest parts, maybe this here. I have to be careful to not go overboard with this. And then maybe this here, but not the whole square. A little bit of this here as well. Here. Well, here I believe. Here. We will readjust when we are further down the road. Just a little here and and here, maybe here, this part as well, and here we need some major brightening of everything. We're going to do that now. Also, there are like stripes going down that are rather more brown than green, so we need to fix that. Let's see, will it work? Kind of, it's not bad. We will need to readjust once again, but the tone is not bad. I'm going over this. And here once again. And here, right. I'm starting to having trouble seeing here and here, 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 here. Well, this just is too unclear for me right now. Not enough, I believe. Still not there. Okay, let's see. So these parts are pretty dark. I have to mark them out, as well as in here, and in here. And I think we're getting to a stage where continuing wet on wet will be somewhat of a challenge. So we will eventually need to stop. Otherwise we are not helping matters for the next sitting. And it will be too unclear. And now we need to establish some whites. These are not perfect whites, mind, so here we go. In that way we are going to obtain this really light green as a byproduct of our effort. And then I will re-insist with some whites afterwards. But this will get the job done. I have something in here. And then like here, here. Right. So the true white we will find in here. Actually, I've picked up a smaller brush, as you can see, it's still a rectangular one. I love me a rectangular flat brush. And this allows me to be a bit more precise about it. Right, then in here. In here, there, here, here, a little bit in here, here, as well, a little bit on the shoulder, here, here, and at the edge of the scarf. White because this is becoming muddy. Right. Start working on Georgina's shirt. It is not completely white yet again. It's a little bit, it's closer to grey. It has a grey, colder undertone. I will bring in the shadows a little bit. like so. And in between, basically I think I will just more or less block it in and let the highlights shine through, more or less. Yes. More or less like this, and then we're going into the deeper shadows at the side of her arm and a little bit in here as well, in the draping, but once again we'll get into the draping in another video when we are going to go into all the details, where everything should go. Should be enough. I feel like I should smooth this out a little bit more though. This is maybe a bit of a harsh shadow. Something like that, and we'll go over with the white once we go into detail. I would like to get the values right at this stage though, so going in with a little bit of white still. This part does not look right to me. That's a little better. Okay, now we still have the skirt, still not a true white, still rather a clear grey that we're dealing with here. So a really thin layer of paint. This is also lace, so this should stay transparent, other than at those parts when the fabric gathers and appears thicker therefore and more opaque, but not in the major parts. There we have the lace, and I'm not going into this right now. We will bring in the pattern in the lace a bit later. I'll leave it like this for now. What we still have to do is her hair. Now, I'm sorry, I will have to be a little bit in front of the camera, I believe, because otherwise I'm getting those reflections and do not see what I'm doing here. So the major part of her hair appears black. I don't believe it really is, because you can see in the highlights that she's actually brunette. She has brown hair, but while the hair gathers, once again, it appears thicker and so more dense, and therefore always darker. You have to keep that in mind. So we only are going into the highlights with the brown where the light catches it. So here, a little bit here on the neck, here, and maybe here. A little bit there. Now we might also start working on her hand. And this is the chunk of her hand. Okay, now we are going with a smaller brush. I'm going to lighten it up while the light catches her hand. So here, and we do not make a straight line. Then we have somewhat of a redder bit of her finger that we are going to mark out. And now I'm going in with a darker brown in order to make out the separation between her fingers. And this is better to make wet on dry. It would make for a cleaner outline. I hope I'm not butchering everything. Well, it's not perfect, but it is a start, okay? Don't judge me here. We'll get there, but you won't get there on the first try. I would say that this is it for now. For this first layer of color, we have to let everything sit a little bit and dry before we can go on to the next stage and work on the details. This is it for today, guys. This is the end of our session where we put down the first layer of color on top of the underpainting. As you can see, everything is still a little sketchy, a little rough around the edges. We do not have really defined lines or very sharp forms. All we have is a base layer that gives us a good base to work upon for the next time. You have the base color that is giving the tone and maybe the mood of the painting. So it is really crucial to get this one right, because this will lessen the amount of work and thought you need to put into your work the next time. The better you do this, the easier it will get to get into details and sculpting the forms at a later stage. You don't need to worry if some colors appear to be too bright right now. It always is the case when the color is wet. Once it has time to sit down a little bit, it calms down and blends into the rest really neatly, so all those orange patches will not appear as shouty as they are now. This is a bit of a frustrating stage where you see where the painting can go, so you can't wait for you to go there, and yet you know that this still looks a little childish, a little lacking in finesse. But it would not be really constructive for us to continue this session today and push it any further, because you do need to leave the paint sit down a little bit, otherwise we'll just risk lifting off the pre-existing layers and muddling everything too much together. I do feel comfortable leaving it be for now, and prefer that you would join me in the next video in order to continue this, where we will be able to go much further into the details and sculpting the different forms that are defining this painting. I hope you found this session helpful and enjoyable, and as always I hope to see you in my next video very soon. Until then, have a lovely morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are. See you guys.